Welcome to A Quiet Journey. Before we begin, I invite you to make yourself comfortable. Perhaps dim the lights, wrap yourself in something warm, and let the pace of the day begin to slow. This is your time, a moment to breathe. If you enjoy calm stories like this, gentle wanderings through the past, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. It helps others find this space of stillness. And I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Leave a comment below and share your corner of the world. Tonight we'll steep ourselves in the delicate, aromatic history of tea. This is not a tale of conquest or kings, but of leaves and silence, of warm cups and hands cradling comfort. Together, we'll travel through the misty mountains of ancient China, into the shaded tea gardens of Japan, and rest for a while in the parlor rooms of Victorian England. So settle in, let the weight of the day slip quietly away. Let us begin. In the beginning, there was steam and silence, and a leaf that danced its way into a bowl of warm water. The story of tea begins not with conquest or great fanfare, but with a quiet accident. Legend places us in 2737 BCE in the shaded garden of Emperor Shennong. He, a scholar and healer, rested beneath the sprawling canopy of a wild tea tree, boiling water as part of his daily hygiene. A breeze stirred. A handful of leaves fell into his cup. Curious, he drank. What he tasted was subtle, slightly bitter, and entirely new. In time, it would become something sacred. Though the story may be myth, the drink it describes is anything but. The earliest uses of tea in China were medicinal, a stimulant for weary eyes, a cleanser for the blood, a companion to silent prayer. The leaves were not steeped in porcelain or served in elaborate ceremonies. They were boiled, consumed simply, as a bitter tonic that stimulated the senses and brought clarity to the mind. In the southern province of Yunnan, even today, ancient tea forests survive. These groves, thick with mist and tangled with moss-covered trees, are home to some of the oldest tea plants in the world. Tall, wild and gnarled by centuries, they speak to a time when tea was not cultivated in rows, but gathered with reverence. Harvesting these wild leaves was not a task taken lightly. In many early tribes and villages, tea was gathered during specific seasons, its timing in rhythm with the moon, rainfall and sun. The leaves were carefully steamed to halt oxidation, then pressed into dense bricks for ease of transport and trade. These bricks were sometimes imprinted with intricate designs or imperial seals, transforming them from humble nourishment into valuable currency. These early bricks of tea were rugged and earthy. To prepare a cup, one might chip off a corner, crush it into fine dust, and boil it in water with other herbs or even salt. The result was a dark, hearty drink, less refined than what we imagine today, but deeply warming. By the time of the Han Dynasty, tea was becoming more common among the upper classes, but it was during the Tang Dynasty, 618 to 907 CE, that tea truly blossomed into culture. The Tang period was an age of poetry, art, and exploration. Buddhism and Taoism influenced daily life, and in this context, the quiet ritual of tea found fertile ground. Tea houses emerged in the bustling capital of Chang'an, a city teeming with merchants, scholars, monks, and travelers from across the Silk Road. These tea houses were places of both conversation and contemplation. Musicians might perform a gentle melody, while patrons sipped from shallow ceramic bowls. In quieter corners, monks would sit, drinking tea as they prepared for meditation, the rhythm of the ritual calming the mind and steadying the breath. One man from this era would become forever entwined with tea culture, Lu Yu. A poet, scholar, and recluse, Lu Yu spent years studying and writing about tea. His book, the classic of tea, Cha Jing, was the first of its kind. Within its pages, he detailed everything from the best regions for growing tea to the ideal shape of a tea whisk. He described the proper method for boiling water, which vessels were best suited to tea preparation, and how to observe the foam and fragrance as the brew developed. For Lu Yu, tea was not just a beverage. It was a path to self-cultivation. It required patience, observation, and care. His text spoke not only to preparation, but to philosophy, to the belief that something simple could become profound through attention. A typical Tang Dynasty tea preparation was both beautiful and austere. Water was drawn from springs, ideally one flowing gently from the side of a mountain. The vessel for boiling was often a bronze or copper kettle suspended over glowing coals. Tea bricks were ground into a fine powder using a mortar and pestle, then whisked into the hot water to create a frothy, fragrant brew. No milk, no sugar, just leaf, water, and presence. Even the utensils carried meaning. A bamboo whisk, a clay bowl, a wooden tray, each item, though simple, was crafted with care. Their textures and materials harmonized with the natural world. This, too, was part of the ritual. But tea was not limited to monastic life or elite circles. As dynasties rose and fell, tea spread throughout the countryside. Farmers drank it before working in the fields. Travelers brewed it over campfires. Storytellers sipped it as they spoke to gathered crowds. Over time, tea became a quiet companion to many walks of life. It was offered to guests as a sign of respect. It was poured during weddings, shared during funerals, and used to honor ancestors in ritual ceremonies. Even the act of serving tea to one's elders became a gesture of deep reverence. Poets of the Tang era often wrote about tea. They described the lightness of its steam, the brightness of its taste, the serenity it offered the spirit. One poet, Jiaoren, wrote, "In the stillness of dawn, I boil spring water, the mountains at peace. A bowl of tea before me, the heart of all things rests." Such verses were not exaggeration, but reflection. For in the still moment between boil and sip, something changed. Time softened. The mind cleared. And within that humble act of drinking tea, a deeper rhythm was remembered. The appreciation for tea's aesthetics also grew. Potters developed glazes that highlighted the color of the tea. Celadon, hare's fur, and black mirror bowls became prized for how they framed the drink. The very sound of pouring water into a bowl became a kind of music, described by connoisseurs as like the sound of wind in pine, or a light rain falling on leaves. Tea inspired painters, who depicted scholars sitting beneath bamboo groves with bowls in hand. It influenced architects, who designed tea houses with particular attention to light, shadow, and air. It even influenced politics, as taxation and trade regulations around tea became a source of revenue and control. Yet despite its growing complexity, tea remained grounded in stillness. It was not about performance or display, it was about return. Return to breath, return to quiet, return to presence. In the centuries that followed, tea would evolve. It would travel across seas and through empires. It would meet sugar and milk, find new rituals, and settle into cultures far from the forests of Yunnan. But its beginning, the leaf, the water, the bowl, would always remain simple. So when we drink tea today, we drink with Shen Nong, with Lu Yu, with the monks and farmers and poets of ancient China. We join them across time in the same breath, the same pause, the same stillness that began it all. When tea arrived in Japan, it did not arrive with the clatter of trade wagons or the bustle of markets. It did not sail in crates or come with merchant coins. It came quietly, carried across the sea in the sleeves of monks, folded gently among scrolls and beads, beside incense and silence. They had studied in the great monasteries of Tang Dynasty China, where tea had already become a favored companion to long hours of meditation. These monks, devoted to discipline and inward stillness, did not bring tea home as a commodity. They brought it as a practice, a gentle ritual to cradle the spirit. Something small that made space for something vast. In Japan, tea would eventually grow into one of the most quietly beautiful rituals the world has known, the tea ceremony, or chanoyu, which translates simply to hot water for tea. And that name, humble and direct, says everything about the spirit of the practice. The earliest tea in Japan was powdered, ground from bricks of steamed leaves into a fine green dust, matcha. At first, it was used primarily by Zen monks to maintain focus and clarity during long periods of zazen, seated meditation. Over time, the practice of preparing and sharing tea spread from the monastery into the wider world, but it never lost its soul. By the 15th century, the tea ceremony had become an art form unto itself. Under the influence of Zen philosophy, it turned away from grandeur, from display, from extravagance. What emerged instead was a ritual of quiet, of grace, of impermanence. The ceremony was practiced in small rustic tea huts, chashitsu, often no more than a few paces wide. These huts were built within gardens, not as showpieces, but as expressions of natural simplicity. The path leading to the hut, called roji, was more than just a walkway. It was a transition, a quiet descent from the outer world into something slower and more intimate. The roji was often lined with stepping stones, partially covered in moss, with carefully chosen plants arching over the way. A bamboo fountain might trickle in the background. The sound of water, the rustle of leaves, these became the first notes of the ceremony, even before a word was spoken. The host, who would prepare the tea, began long before any guest arrived. Every movement was deliberate. The sweeping of the path, the placement of a single flower in a vase, the hanging of a kakemono, or scroll, bearing perhaps a single character, a line of poetry, or a brush-painted enso, an empty circle symbolizing unity and the beauty of incompletion. The tools were selected not for ornament, but for feeling. A tea bowl might be slightly cracked or asymmetrical, and that imperfection was not a flaw to be hidden. It was a truth to be embraced. Wabi-sabi, the appreciation of things weathered by time, touched by nature, and marked by use, was central to the ceremony's aesthetic. When the guests arrived, they did so quietly, often in the early evening, when the air was cooling and the light was soft. They removed their shoes and stepped carefully onto the tatami mats of the tea room. They bowed to the host. The host bowed in return, and then they entered a shared silence that was not empty, but full, with attention, with respect, with stillness. The room itself was sparse, a square space with wooden beams, rice paper windows and low ceilings. Light filtered in gently. Shadows moved slowly. There was no furniture save a small hearth for the kettle and a few cushions. Every item had its place. Every line was clean. At the heart of the ceremony was the tea itself. The powdered matcha was stored in a small lacquer container called a natsume and sifted into a handcrafted ceramic bowl, chawan, which the host had likely used hundreds of times before. The water, heated just below boiling over charcoal, was ladled with a long bamboo dipper, hishaku, into the bowl. Then came the chasen, the bamboo whisk. Its tines were fine and delicate, split from a single piece of bamboo with great care. The host whisked the tea in circular motions, Not frantically, not carelessly, but rhythmically, like breath. The goal was not speed or froth, it was balance. The sound of whisking was part of the experience, a soft rustle, a sigh. It spoke of attention given fully, of hands knowing their work. When the tea was ready, the host gently rotated the bowl so that the most beautiful side faced the guest. They offered it with both hands. The guest received it likewise, cupped carefully, bowed slightly, and turned the bowl once more before drinking. The guest drank slowly. 3 sips, no more, no less. Then the bowl was set down. The silence deepened. It was not awkward, it was not tense, it was full. The guests felt the steam on their faces, the warmth in their hands, the slight bitterness on their tongues. And together, without speaking, they shared a moment that was as complete and fleeting as a falling cherry blossom. The entire ceremony might last just 20 minutes, or it might stretch to an hour. But every detail, from the season of the flower to the curve of the bowl to the brushwork on the scroll, was chosen to mirror that particular moment in time. No ceremony was ever quite the same. Each one was a once-in-a-lifetime encounter. Ichi go, ichi e. That phrase, often spoken in the spirit of tea, means one time, one meeting. It reminds us that every gathering is unrepeatable. Every cup is the only cup of its kind. The tea ceremony, then, is not about tea. It is not even about aesthetics. It is about being fully alive to what is happening now. It is a ceremony of stillness, not a forced stillness, but a receptive one. A stillness that listens, that waits, that watches. A stillness that reveals. Over time, this quiet practice shaped more than just afternoon gatherings. It influenced architecture, flower arrangement, calligraphy, and even the philosophy of martial arts. Its emphasis on grace, humility, and presence seeped into the cultural soil of Japan. Masters of tea, such as Sen no Rikyu, refined the practice further. Rikyu emphasized simplicity to the point of sacredness. He believed that even the grandest ceremony should feel like a conversation between friends. That the true heart of tea lay in its honesty, in the way it welcomed the imperfect, the aged, the quiet. It was Rikyu who helped shape the tea room as we know it today. Small, with a low entrance so all who entered, samurai, merchant, or monk, would bow, becoming equal in humility. It was he who insisted that the tools be functional, that the flower be wild, and that the air be still. And even now, centuries later, that spirit lives on. In modern Japan, chanoyu is still practiced, not always with the full ceremony, but with a reverence for the same principles. Tea may be served in a classroom, a garden, or a quiet corner of a bustling city. The space may change, the tools may vary, but the essence remains. To sit with a bowl of tea, to prepare it with care, to offer it with 2 hands and receive it in silence, is to step outside of time, to join a lineage of quiet moments that stretches back not just centuries, but lifetimes. And perhaps that is the gift tea has given to Japan. Not a drink, not even a ceremony, but a way of returning, again and again, to the still point in the turning world. From mountain temples and silent rituals, tea began to move, not hurriedly, not loudly, but like a whisper in wind or steam lifting from a warm cup. Its path was not carved by conquest, nor propelled by great armies, but carried gently by merchants, pilgrims, monks, and time. It was folded into saddlebags, tucked beside bolts of silk and baskets of spices, and passed from hand to hand like a secret. It first made its way across Asia, traveling north into Tibet, where the high altitudes and cold climate demanded something hearty. There, tea became butter tea, po cha, a thick, warming brew made with black tea, yak butter and salt. It was not elegant, but nourishing, a staple for survival, a comfort in the biting cold of Himalayan winds. The butter gave strength, the salt replenished, and the tea, always the tea, gave clarity. In Mongolia too, tea took on a hearty character, often mixed with milk or grains. The leaves were boiled directly in pots over open flames, sometimes seasoned with roasted millet or clarified butter. Tea was not just a beverage, but a foundation of hospitality. To refuse a cup was to reject welcome. It was a drink that bound communities together in yurts under wide, open skies. Farther west, the great arteries of trade, the Silk Roads, became pathways for tea. These ancient routes stretched from China through Central Asia to the Mediterranean, touching Persia, Arabia, and beyond. Here, tea traveled not as a delicacy, but as a companion to other treasures, brocades, saffron, gems, and porcelain. On these paths, tea took a different form, compressed into solid bricks, easy to stack, easy to carry, resistant to spoilage. These tea bricks, stamped with markings or pressed into molds with decorative symbols, became more than a way to brew a drink. In some places, they became currency. A brick of tea could be traded for salt, for a horse, for food. It could be broken down into wedges, portions shaved off with a knife. It was a form of wealth as well as warmth. The caravans that moved along the Silk Road, trains of camels, donkeys, and horses, were slow-moving, their progress measured in sunrises and stars. And yet with each stop, in each tent and market, tea found new hands, new stories, new ways of being served. It passed through tongues and tongues again, its name shifting shape. Cha in Mandarin, Che in Persian, Chai in Hindi, Te in Minnan dialect, which would become tea in the West. By the 16th century, European traders began to take notice. They had long been enchanted by the East, its spices, its silks, its ceramics. But now something new began to draw their curiosity. A small green leaf that, when dried and steeped, offered clarity, calm, and a touch of the exotic. The Portuguese were among the first to make sustained contact with the tea-drinking cultures of Asia. Jesuit missionaries and merchants, stationed in Macau and along the Chinese coast, began sending reports back to Europe about this curious beverage. They described its role in medicine, its place in ceremony, its subtle flavors. Small quantities were brought home, not for commerce yet, but as novelties, as wonders. Then came the Dutch. With their far-reaching mercantile network and aggressive ambition, they saw in tea both opportunity and art. The Dutch East India Company, one of the most powerful trading entities of the age, began importing tea in greater amounts. At first, it was sold in apothecaries, as a medicine, a tonic, something to cure melancholy or calm the nerves. Physicians recommended it for digestion, for gout, for fatigue of the mind. But its uses soon extended beyond the medicinal. In the homes of the Dutch elite, tea was served in small, fragile porcelain cups. The leaves, carefully measured and steeped, were often locked in special caddies, precious for their rarity and cost. As demand grew, the supply followed. Ships from Asia began to carry greater loads, not only tea, but all that accompanied it: porcelain, lacquered tea chests, carved scoops, and strainers. Tea became not just a drink, but an entire aesthetic. In France, the drink made its entrance among the nobility. At salons, those intimate gatherings of intellectuals, artists, and aristocrats, tea was offered alongside philosophical discussions and poetry readings. It was exotic, refined, and a mark of distinction. Its bitter taste was tempered with sugar, a substance equally rare and equally prized. In Russia, tea arrived over land via the Moscow-Urga-Kyakhta trade route, known as the Great Tea Road. Caravans, sometimes more than 200 camels strong, brought crates of tea bricks from China into Siberia and across to Moscow. The journey took months, sometimes nearly a year. And yet the Russians embraced tea with great affection. They brewed it strong, using a small pot called a zavarka, placed atop a samovar, a large urn filled with hot water. Guests could dilute their tea to taste. It was often served with sugar cubes, lemon slices, or even jam. The tea was dark, full-bodied, and shared slowly. It became a fixture of Russian life, from the palaces of the Tsars to the cottages of the countryside. It warmed through bitter winters. It softened conversations. It soothed. In the Ottoman Empire, where coffee had long been king, tea began to find its way into the culture as a quiet complement. Not a rival, but a companion. Sipped in gardens, shared in tiled courtyards, and eventually served in the glass tulip cups still used in Turkey today, tea became part of daily rhythm. Strong, black, and always shared, it was served with conversation, contemplation, or simply the pleasure of watching the day pass. In every place it touched, tea transformed. It adjusted not by shedding its essence, but by listening. It absorbed the temperament of each culture like water into leaves. In the chilly, damp climate of England, tea was served hot and often sweetened, a counterbalance to grey skies and coal fires. In India, where the British later planted vast tea estates, tea would become chai, spiced, creamy, bold. In North Africa, it would be poured with flair from silver pots into etched glasses over sprigs of fresh mint. Everywhere it went, tea adapted. It spoke new languages. It wore new robes. But it always brought the same quiet invitation: to pause, to sip, to connect. As tea traveled farther, it passed through more than just geography. It entered literature, art, and daily life. It appeared in paintings, in the hands of scholars and housemaids alike. It entered letters written by candlelight. It sat on bedside tables and alongside chessboards. It was there in both the halls of kings and the huts of wanderers. Its spread was not one of domination, but of diffusion. It did not conquer, it was welcomed. And that may be tea's greatest legacy, not just its taste, nor its health benefits, nor its rituals, but the way it brings people together, across cultures, across generations, across continents. To share tea is to share a moment, a breath, a stillness in the swirl of time. And so, from the wild mountains of Yunnan to the cold plains of Russia, from the gilded salons of Paris to the dusty stalls of Samarkand, the leaf continued its journey. Across oceans, across borders, across lives. Never loud, always warm, always present. When tea first touched the shores of England in the early 17th century, it arrived softly, almost shyly, like mist rolling in across the hills. It was not yet the beloved staple it would become. It was something new, mysterious. A curiosity found only in the most rarefied spaces, salons of the aristocracy, botanical journals of scholars, the shelves of well-connected apothecaries. It had made its way west by ship, crossing oceans in chests marked with care, nestled among porcelain, silk, and spices. When it landed in London, it entered a society that was hungry for novelty, where the exotic and the foreign were valued as signs of refinement and worldliness. The word tea itself seemed delicate, whispered like a secret passed from one velvet glove to another. Early on, tea was found only in the homes of the wealthy, dispensed in small amounts, measured with precision. It was not simply served, it was presented. A silver caddy, locked to prevent theft, might contain just a few precious ounces. A lady of the house would hold the key, and to be offered a cup, was a subtle signal of trust, status, and grace. The tea was often green, lightly oxidized, and brewed with care. It was consumed in delicate porcelain cups, imported from China, or in copies made by European potters inspired by their Eastern counterparts. To accompany it, thin biscuits, slices of fruit, perhaps a syllabub or preserved sweetmeat. The experience was part beverage, part ritual, part theatre. But the British are a people of habit, and over time, what began as novelty became pattern. What began as luxury became lifestyle. By the 18th century, tea had begun to filter down through the classes. Not quickly, not all at once, but gradually, in the way steam curls around a room. The East India Company, ever in search of profit, expanded its tea trade. Prices, though still high, became more accessible. Tea shops opened, selling loose leaves to those who had only just begun to afford them. And as tea found its way into more homes, it found its place in more hearts. It is often said that the British love ceremony, that they are drawn to ritual. And nowhere is this more evident than in the rise of afternoon tea. The story goes that Anna, the 7th Duchess of Bedford, grew weary of the long stretch between luncheon and supper. In an era when dinner might not be served until 8 or even 9 p.m., the late afternoon became a lonely and empty time. And so, she asked for a pot of tea and a small snack to be brought to her room. This modest indulgence soon became a daily occurrence. She began inviting friends to join her. They would gather in her private sitting room, enjoy cups of tea with light refreshments, tiny sandwiches, sponge cakes and pastries, and share in soft conversation. Word spread, imitation followed, and what began as a solution to hunger became a social cornerstone. Throughout the 19th century, the tradition of afternoon tea blossomed. It moved from boudoirs to parlors, from parlors to gardens. It was formalized in etiquette books. It was adorned in literature and painted into the lives of Jane Austen's heroines and Victorian matrons. The menu expanded. Finger sandwiches with cucumber or watercress, scones split open and filled with clotted cream and strawberry jam, layered sponge cakes dusted with sugar, and always the tea, steaming in polished pots, poured through silver strainers, sweetened with sugar, softened with milk. The rhythm of the day now had a gentle center, a pause, a breath, an hour, not of labor or business or noise, but of nourishment, reflection and companionship. But tea was not confined to the upper echelons of society. As the 19th century gave way to the 20th, tea moved into the hands of workers, soldiers, shopkeepers, and children. It became everyday. During the Industrial Revolution, as cities grew and machines clattered through long shifts, tea offered a moment of reprieve. The factory whistle might blow, and workers would set down their tools, reach for a tin mug, and take a short, precious tea break. In mines and mills, in shipyards and schools, tea brought people together. It warmed cold hands. It quieted tired nerves. It gave strength. It gave pause. It became not just a drink, but a companion to the rhythm of British life. Morning tea with breakfast, afternoon tea with friends, a last cup before bed. The kettle on the stove became as constant as the ticking of the clock. And in the home, tea became its own kind of hearth. The kettle hissed softly. The teapot sat at the center of the table, flanked by mugs or cups or chipped china. Families gathered around it. News was shared over it. Grief was softened by it. In times of celebration, tea was served with cake. In times of sorrow, it was made quietly and passed gently into waiting hands. It asked nothing. It demanded nothing. It simply was. Even the rituals of preparation became comforting. Filling the kettle, watching it boil, choosing the right cup, pouring the water over the leaves, letting it steep just long enough. A meditation disguised as a habit. Then came war. During World War II, as bombs fell and blackouts blanketed cities, tea remained. It was rationed, yes, but never forbidden. The British government, understanding its symbolic and emotional importance, ensured that tea was included in soldiers' rations and made available to civilians. In bomb shelters, neighbors huddled together, waiting for the all-clear sirens to sound. And when they did, someone would say, almost instinctively, "I'll put the kettle on." That phrase, so simple, became a balm, a promise of return to normalcy, of warmth in a world gone cold. For soldiers on the front, tea was a taste of home. Made in tin cups, over campfires, or in mess halls, it was shared among comrades with few words and great meaning. In the face of uncertainty, tea was an anchor. And when peace returned, tea endured. It filled the gaps left by loss. It welcomed back the living. It returned to tables and shelves and shop fronts, as ordinary as bread, as sacred as memory. By the mid-20th century, tea had become not just British, but part of Britain. It was woven into the identity of the nation. You could find it in the works of Virginia Woolf, where a pot of tea centers a conversation. In the world of Sherlock Holmes, where Mrs. Hudson brings the detective a restorative cup. In the letters of soldiers and the diaries of mothers. In the daily rituals of millions. Even as coffee gained popularity and modern schedules grew more rushed, tea held its own. In thermoses on trains, in mugs beside computers, in flasks at football matches, in the tea rooms of the Lake District, and the high teas of London hotels. Today, tea remains both ordinary and extraordinary. It is offered to guests as a sign of welcome. It is brewed in solitude as a moment of peace. It is taken in celebration, in sorrow, in habit, in hope. It does not ask for ceremony, though it welcomes it. It does not require silence, though it makes space for it. It lives quietly in the background of life, like a favorite melody you hum without thinking. And perhaps that is its secret, not just its flavor, not even its comfort, but its stillness. Because when the kettle hums, and the water is poured, and the scent of steeped leaves rises like memory from the cup, the world softens. The edges blur. Time stretches just enough for you to remember that you are here, that this moment, brief and warm, is yours. And that, whether shared across a lace-covered table or sipped in silence at dawn, is what tea in Britain came to mean. Not just tradition, not just identity, but presence. In the quiet hush of dawn or the stillness of a late evening, in the crowded pulse of a market or the dim corridor of a monastery, tea continues to be poured. Though centuries have passed since its legendary discovery in ancient China, and though the leaf has crossed oceans, empires, and epochs, tea today remains something familiar, something cherished. In a world that rushes, tea lingers. In a world that demands, tea invites. It is the gentlest of customs, the simplest of acts. And still, it brings us together. Across the globe, the ways of preparing and serving tea have branched into countless styles, each shaped by the geography, traditions, and tastes of its people. Yet, beneath all these variations is a shared truth. Tea offers a pause. In Morocco, tea is not just offered, it is performed. The act of brewing and serving mint tea or ate is ceremonial. It begins with green tea, often gunpowder variety, steeped with fresh spearmint and generous spoonfuls of sugar. The aroma is herbal, sweet, and comforting. But the beauty lies not only in its ingredients, but in its presentation. The host, often the head of the household or the most respected guest, pours the tea from a height. A silver teapot is raised above eye level, the liquid descending in a smooth, slender arc into small, decorated glasses. This pour is not simply for flair. It oxygenates the tea, cooling it slightly, releasing its fragrance. To be served tea in Morocco is to be welcomed. The first glass refreshes, the second warms the spirit, the third is said to be the true taste of friendship. Conversation flows as freely as the tea, and guests are rarely allowed to leave after just one cup. To decline tea would be to decline hospitality itself. In every courtyard, under woven awnings, in the hum of a market stall or the shade of a garden fig tree, tea brings people together. Far from the desert warmth of North Africa in Russia, tea is brewed to withstand the cold. In a land of long winters and short days, tea is prepared in samovars, large metal vessels, often ornate, and sometimes family heirlooms. The process begins with zavarka, a strong tea concentrate kept hot atop the samovar. Guests or family members dilute this concentrate with hot water to their liking, customizing strength and taste. Lemon slices, sugar cubes, and even spoonfuls of berry jam are traditional accompaniments. Tea in Russia is not rushed. It's a part of conversation, a ritual of endurance, of warmth. Stories are shared over glass cups held in metal holders. The steam from the samovar fills the room like a fog, thick with memory and meaning. It is not uncommon for tea to be poured several times over the course of an evening, especially in rural towns where community ties remain strong. Tea anchors people to the hearth, to each other. In India, tea is chai, and chai is more than a drink. It is music, scent, and rhythm, boiling, not steeped, sweet, spiced, and rich. From Mumbai's high-rises to the back alleys of Kolkata, chai is made by vendors known as chaiwalas. These roadside brewers are a fixture of daily life. With tin kettles over charcoal flames, they stir black tea leaves with water, milk, sugar, and spices like ginger, cardamom, and cinnamon. The bubbling mixture is strained and served in small glasses or disposable clay cups known as kulhads. The scent alone is grounding, peppery, sweet, earthy. People gather, leaning on scooters or shop doors, sipping and watching the world stir awake. There is something wonderfully democratic about chai. It's for everyone, rich or poor, urban or rural, early morning worker or late night philosopher. Each cup is affordable. Each moment shared is priceless. In Taiwan, China, and parts of Southeast Asia, tea maintains deep ties to mindfulness. The Gongfu tea ceremony, practiced especially in Taiwan and southern China, is less theatrical than Japan's Chanoyu, but equally meditative. Small clay teapots and tiny cups are used. The focus is on the leaves themselves, often oolong or pu'er, which are steeped multiple times. Each infusion reveals a different layer of flavor. The tea is not gulped but sipped, with time given to inhale its aroma before tasting. The host moves deliberately, heating the water, rinsing the cups, watching the leaves unfurl like small paper scrolls in a hot stream. The process encourages stillness, a slowing down. The hands work gently, the senses awaken. Guests are silent, not out of solemnity, but because the moment is full enough without words. Though we explored Japan's historic tea ceremony earlier, modern Japan continues to honor tea in daily life, especially in the form of matcha. From vending machines to cafes, powdered green tea is a staple. It's mixed with milk as a latte, with sweet red beans as a dessert, or served in its traditional unsweetened form. Convenience does not erase its reverence. Even quick preparations still carry echoes of mindfulness. The whisk, the bowl, the pause before the first sip. In urban office buildings, green tea is brewed in simple sachets and sipped quietly before meetings. In homes, it is shared between generations, a quiet act of continuity. In Europe and North America, tea has shed its formal attire and taken on countless new costumes. Walk into a modern cafe, and you may find lavender chamomile blends, turmeric ginger infusions, or bubble tea filled with chewy tapioca pearls. Yet behind the innovations, the impulse remains unchanged. A desire for calm, for comfort, for something warm to hold between your hands when the world feels too large. In office kitchens, electric kettles hum beside baskets of tea bags, peppermint, blackcurrant, rooibos, lemon balm. In homes, families keep favorite mugs, each with its own story. Even the simple act of selecting a flavor becomes a choice of intention. Peppermint for digestion, chamomile for sleep, green tea for energy, Earl Grey for habit and memory. Tea still marks transitions, the end of a workday, the start of a conversation, the quiet breath before bed. In all of these places, in all of these ways, tea has become more than just a drink. It is a living ritual, adapted to the times yet anchored in something timeless. In joy, tea is raised in toast. In sorrow, it is brewed in silence. In solitude, it comforts. In company, it connects. Each culture has steeped it differently, but the invitation remains the same: to slow down, to be present, to sip, not gulp, to listen. Across generations and geographies, the steam rising from a cup speaks a language older than words. It tells us that we are here, now, and that this moment, however fleeting, is enough. Whether you are drinking from a clay cup in a street market or a bone china teacup in a high-ceilinged parlor, you are part of something ancient and ongoing. Each cup links us to stories untold, to ancestors unseen, and to one another. As our modern world races forward, perhaps tea remains because it resists the rush, because it calls us back to breath, to warmth, to stillness. Because even now, we still long for moments that feel like home. So whatever your cup holds, black or green, sweet or spiced, herbal or floral, know this: you are part of a quiet, global conversation, one cup at a time. And now, dear listener, we arrive at the close of our shared path, a path not paved with noise or grand declarations, but with quiet footsteps, taken together, one gentle sip at a time. This has not been a journey of destinations, but of presence, not a chronicle of power, but of peace. We have wandered, softly and slowly, through misted mountains in ancient China, through cedar-framed tea houses in Japan, through silken parlors and bustling marketplaces. We have warmed ourselves beside samovars in Russian winters, paused in Moroccan courtyards, and risen early with chaiwalas under India's dawn. And in each place, we found not simply a beverage, but a shared breath, a moment suspended in steam and silence. Perhaps, as we drifted through these scenes, you prepared a cup of your own, or perhaps, nestled into your pillow, you listened with eyes closed, allowing each description to steep in the stillness of your evening. However you received these words, they were given in the same spirit that tea itself offers, slowly, gently, with care. Because tea is not hurried. It does not demand. It does not strive to be more than what it is. Instead, it welcomes us just as we are. It asks only that we be here, with the warmth in our hands, the aroma in our breath, the silence between words. We live in a world that often moves too fast, a world that asks us to produce, to push, to race from moment to moment. But tea, like sleep, like breath, exists outside that rhythm. It is a counterpoint to chaos, a retreat, a return. Each culture we've touched along this journey has understood this in its own way. Whether served from silver pot or humble clay cup, whether sipped in solitude or shared among many, tea has always whispered the same truth, that there is beauty in the small, grace in the quiet, and rest to be found in ritual. So as we part ways tonight, I invite you to hold on to that truth. Let your next cup, be it mint or matcha, chamomile or chai, not just fill your hands, but empty your worries. Let the sound of water boiling, the soft tap of porcelain, the rise of steam remind you, you are allowed to slow down. You are allowed to pause. You are allowed to simply be. If tomorrow brings challenges, remember this moment. Remember the hush that lives in every teacup, the stillness that waits behind every steeped leaf. Return to it whenever you need. And if tonight brings sleep, may it come gently, like steam curling into lamplight. May it come without haste, without burden. May it wrap you in the same quiet comfort as a warm mug on a cold day. Because tea is more than tradition. It is presence. It is peace. And peace, like tea, is meant to be savored. So whether you are sitting in silence, journaling by candlelight, watching snow fall beyond your window, or lying under the soft press of blankets, may your next cup bring you back to yourself. The story of tea is not finished. It continues in the mornings that begin with boiling water, in the afternoons shared over clinking teaspoons, in the evenings when you finally breathe deep and exhale. It lives in the hands that pass the cup, in the eyes that meet across the table, in the stillness between one sip and the next. And in that stillness, there is a kind of grace, a kind of hope, a kind of quiet that does not need to be explained. So thank you, dear listener, for journeying with me through these gentle histories, these fragrant memories, these moments suspended in time. I hope you find rest tonight. I hope you find warmth. And above all, I hope you find a little more space inside yourself to simply be. Until next time, may peace steep quietly into the corners of your evening. Good night, Nila.